Hello, Doolin Church. It's me, James, your pastor. I'm so delighted to be with you today. So glad you could join me on in these Doolin Weekly Moments, whether you're watching on Facebook or our YouTube page or our web page, or you're listening to us on the Doolin Weekly podcast available to you on uh, Apple and Spotify and a variety of other channels as well. No matter how you're coming uh, to this moment, I'm delighted to be with you. Delighted to have this opportunity to share some thoughts about this spiritual life. And as you know, we've been in a series for the last several weeks about being like Jesus. What does it mean to be like Jesus? What are some of the things that Jesus did that maybe we are meant to uh, follow along and do too? So often, and I grew up thinking that my primary work was to believe in Jesus. And I think believing in Jesus is a good thing. Believing in what he stands for, under, giving ourselves over to following after his path. But what does that path look like? And isn't it something more than just believing, having an intellectual assent to a connection to God through Jesus, and perhaps learning how um, to behave, to engage life in ways that will bring us closer to God. I am convinced that part of the reason that the Christ became embodied as fully as the Christ was in Jesus was so that we might see what it would look like for any of us to embody the Christ. Because I think that accepting and welcoming and living into this Christianity, this following the path of Jesus, is an invitation to be more Christ like and to model that in our everyday lives. So, having said all of those preliminary things, this week I want to talk to you about something I see Jesus doing all the time: asking good questions. People ask him a question, and so often, if you look closely, read the four Gospels, when they would ask a question of him, he would turn around and ask a good question back. Now, some people are all about answers. And as your pastor, I know that sometimes you approach me and you're hoping when you ask a question that I will give you an answer and that it will be an intelligible answer. Some of you have discovered, uh, and hopefully in a kind of joyful, playful way, that if you ask me a question, there's often a story involved, and it takes a little while to get to the other side of that question. You may or may not ask too many yes or no questions, and asking a yes no question does not determine whether my answer will simply be a one word yes or no. Oftentimes, there's a story as I try to fit the pieces together and speak to it. Sometimes, though, when I'm being like Jesus, I ask a question back to try to get some clarification, to try to help you find your own answer. The best folks in my life who have been therapists in my life, who have been spiritual directors in my life, who have been mentors and friends, didn't just give me simple answers, but asked good questions. Faith invites us into asking good questions. It's not just about having certainty and specific answers ready to give at any moment. Part of this being alive in this big, beautiful world, universe that God is making is the invitation for us to ask good questions about how things work and how things came to be and who we are and who we are in relationship to each other and who we are in relationship to God and how that all matters, where that all matters, what matters in life, what is the meaning of this life we live. We ask good questions, and um, without rushing to an answer, we explore what we know, what we think, what we dream about who God is and who we are. When we ask good questions, we form deeper relationships. Think about the first time you began um, dating someone, if you've ever dated. Now, if you're a very young person, you've never dated before, okay, this may not apply to you. But imagine the first time you were making a friendship, you were forming some kind of relationship in life. Weren't there a lot of questions involved? Now, depending upon the kinds of questions, sometimes they're kind of inane. What do you do? What kind of job do you have? Where do you live? Where are you from? What school did you go to? I mean, those are ways to glean little tiny pieces about something, to begin to get a picture of someone. So you ask those questions because you're trying to contextualize the person you're with, understand where they might be coming from, and perhaps the high school and they went to, the place they grew up, if they went to college, the college they attend, who is their favorite sports team. It will tell you something if they choose to tell you something about baseball or American football or European football. If they talk about tennis or golf, what your favorite sport is. It might say something about you. Where you grew up might say something about you. Whether it was a small town or a big metropolis, whatever it turns out to be, all those things are questions we often ask because those become identifiers, ways of understanding who the other person might be. Questions often begin, and sometimes they're statements. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And if the person that's too broad, then you begin to ask more specific questions. I have found in my own life of faith that sometimes I have really big questions for God. When things aren't going as I might have anticipated, when what I thought by faith would be true in my life, and it isn't, those become moments when I get to struggle with the question. I get to struggle with it on my own, but I am never afraid to ask those exact same questions of the divine. God, what is going on? Where are you in all of these things that are going on? I look around in the world. I listen to the news sometimes. Usually I don't. Mostly I read the news, and I selectively read the news from various sources. And as I read it, I might think, where are you in all of this mess, God? My faith would say to me, in the simplest way, the answer to the question is everywhere. God is right in the suffering with those who are suffering. God is right in the pain with those who are in pain. But what does that mean? Asking good questions is what Jesus did well. That's what he did a lot of things well. All right, let's be honest. But he asked questions. And sometimes those questions turned around the question that had been asked him for the other person to answer back. When I think about faith, and when people come to my office or call me on the phone or send me an email and talk to me about their faith, sometimes what they want is a good answer to the question they're asking. But I will tell you this, that the best answers of faith, about my faith, about who I am, that I have gleaned in my life have come after I struggled with it, not when somebody else told me what the answer was or even gave me an answer. Because the truth is, sometimes the answers we receive are not the answers that are true. Not for us, not for the way we see it. You could ask me today, who is Jesus? And I would share some thoughts with you, but you ask me again tomorrow, I might say something completely different. Because the aspects of Jesus and the limitless ways of being able to see who he was and where I am in a given moment means I answer the question differently. The same is true for you. How do you deal with suffering, James? I can tell you some stories about how I've dealt with it and how I've come to terms with it. And those stories may be helpful to you. But telling you how you're going to deal with it is something you need to wrestle with and find. I'll encourage you, I'll coach you, I'll help you, I'll even ask some good questions of you. But in the end, oftentimes the good questions come back to us and invite us to really define our relationship with God, with each other, with people of significance, with the world itself. All of these pieces are good questions. Life, life well lived is a life well questioned, perhaps. Certainly, being like Jesus is the invitation. One of the ways to be like him is to ask good questions, and to look for um, ways of answering questions that speak truth into our lives. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Doolin Weekly podcast, Doolin Weekly Moment. Please feel free to share this if it's been helpful to you. Please feel free to reach out to me, pastor@doolinchurch.org. If you have questions, if you want to talk about the topic, if you have good questions you'd like to share, if you have some topics you wish I would talk about in the Doolin Weekly podcast, Doolin Weekly Moment, all of those are great reasons to reach out just to say hi. That's good too. In any case, it's been good to be with you today. I wish you all the best. Until the next time I see you, have a good day.